So we're talking about 2 Samuel chapter 17.
Yes.
This is a cracker of a chapter.
You like this one?
Yeah, I think I do actually.
Okay.
Because I see in here and actually over the next few chapters, this is really showing you that pride goes before a fall.
Oh, yeah.
What's the Proverbs on that? Do you know it?
Pride comes before a fall, a haughty spirit before destruction.
Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit
pride
before
comes
a fall.
Yeah, other way around. But yes, that's
Yeah.
essentially it. Yep.
This is what we see.
This is what we see.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if we were going to say on the other chapters that you sow, you
What
reap what you sow. I said
Yep.
it the wrong way around
Last time, yep.
before. This we can really see pride goes before a fall.
Yes, that's right. Totally. This is really clear that Absalom has let his pride get in the way and a big fall is coming.
Yeah, this is such a good example of the human heart
Yep.
being so full of pride and how it can really destroy people.
True. 100% true, Jeanie.
Yes.
Lead
yeah.
us into the story.
All right. So Ahithophel, geez Louise. How do you say it, Rohan?
Ahithophel.
Ahithophel advised Absalom. You know, I can speak properly, like when I can speak, but when I read,
When
it's
you
something
read,
just
different.
or read out loud, it goes out the
Yeah.
window.
I do have the advantage. I've just been listening to these Bible names being read to me for 30 years, so I sort of know them all now without having to figure out what they say.
Okay, so he was originally Saul's advisor.
Yes.
Sorry, King David's
King
advisor.
David's advisor. Sorry, yes,
Yes.
King David's advisor.
King David's trusted advisor, and his words were like God actually speaking.
Yep.
And so he gives Absalom, who has now assumed the kingdom over David, this example.
So this is immediately following advice point number 1, which we talked about in the last episode regarding sleeping with the concubines. Now this is advice number 2.
Advice number 2 is
Yeah.
actually good advice.
Yes, it's
wise
good advice.
advice.
It's wise advice.
And he says, let me handpick 12,000 men and go after David tonight. David, who has just left the city, who's just been
He's down the road 10 or 15
down the
k's.
road.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll come on him when he's bone tied and I'll take him by complete surprise. The whole army will run off and I'll only kill David. Then I'll bring the army back to you like a bride brought back to her husband. You're only after one man after all. Then everyone will together be in peace. And Absalom at this point thinks this is an excellent strategy and all the elders of Israel agree. And it is an excellent strategy.
If he's trying to achieve that goal, it would have worked, yes.
Yes. But then Absalom says, call in Hushai the Archite. Now, Hushai was part of David's team.
Yep.
And Absalom thinks he has
He thinks he's on Team Absalom, but he's still secretly, covertly on Team David.
working for Dave.
Double agent.
Okay, so Hushai comes in and Absalom says, what do you think? This is what Ahithophel says. Should we do it? What do you say? And Hushai, he comes up with this excellent plan.
Yes, sounds really good.
Yeah, because it appeals to his pride.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah, he says the counsel that Ahithophel has given in this instance is not good. You know your father and his men. They're brave and bitterly angry like a bear robbed of her cubs. And your father is an experienced fighter, which we know that he is. You can be sure he won't be caught napping at a time like this. Even while we're talking, he's probably holed up in some cave or another. And if he jumps your men from ambush, word will soon get back that a slaughter of Absalom's army. So we'll get back. A slaughter of your army, Absalom.
Yep.
Look how foolish
Look
you will
what
be,
an idiot
Absalom.
you'll look like, Absalom.
Yeah, you won't look like a strong,
No.
tough leader.
No.
Like you won't look like a king.
That's right.
So, but even if your men are valiant with hearts of lions, they'll fall apart at such news. For everyone in Israel knows the kind of fighting stuff your father's made of. Oh, if you've missed these other chapters, Absalom is David's son,
Yes.
by the way.
Yep.
They know that your dad's a great fighter and all the men. So Absalom, he's thinking, wow, this is a good idea.
That sounds better than Ahithophel's advice.
Yeah, and it appeals more to his pride here because he says, muster the whole country from Dan to Beersheba. See?
There's Beersheba.
Yeah. I was saying before I get Beersheba and
Bathsheba
Bathsheba
mixed up.
wrong.
Yep.
So an army like the sand of the sea, and you personally lead them, will smoke him out wherever he is, fall on him like dew falls on the earth, and believe me, there won't be a single survivor. If he hides out in a city, the whole army will bring ropes to that city and pull it down. Not so much as a pebble will be left.
No, that sounds like that's appealing to his sense of prowess and pride.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this army, he would lead them, right?
Yeah, it sounds like he's saying you're going to have so much backing behind you, you go and lead the troops.
Yeah. So Hushai is saying to Absalom, get out the front, hold up your banner. He might not have had time to get a banner, but let's assume he has a banner. Ride out there and have this whole army of mighty men following you. And Absalom's thinking, this is the day I've longed for.
Yeah, this is what I've been waiting for.
Yeah, everyone now recognizes the amazing man that I am. I'm going to go out and slaughter my father because he's a bad man.
And, I'm thinking about this just as I'm processing this for the first time. And I've done these stories of David hundreds of times, but I'm just thinking through, I want to try and put myself in Absalom's shoes because I guess I've always thought of Absalom in a really bad way. But I have to wonder if this is Absalom has come to this point because of the deep resentment about the way that his father never dealt with Amnon.
Yep.
And he felt like his sister had been violated. And she had been.
Yes.
So it's what started with almost a sense of justice that was deserved, got manipulated and twisted by the enemy, as it does in all our hearts. So something that looks fair and just, but left to our own devices where we don't give that vengeance over to God. Like this is the difference. David constantly was treated badly by Saul, but he kept giving it back to God. But Absalom owned it and let it twist him, and he finds himself actually poisoned by the same thing that he was accusing his father of being poisoned by.
That's right, yeah. And let's think about this in a way that we might think about it in our culture. Like Absalom is a victim.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, his dad has not done the right thing by him. His dad allowed his half-brother to abuse his sister and David never punished him for that.
Yep.
And so in Absalom's eyes, David is a really bad man.
That's right. And he's let that narrative build up in his life, which is what a victim narrative is, because oftentimes the victim narrative is justified. The person is a victim, but what we do with that victim narrative will determine whether or not we actually then take vengeance into our own hands or whether we leave that with God.
Because Amnon should have been killed, should have been put to death. So Absalom provided the justice in that moment.
Yes.
But then Absalom is the one who is punished and he's kicked out. So he's off feeling resentful and like the victim to because of his dad's actions. And in his eyes, David is a really bad king.
Yeah.
David doesn't bring the proper justice that he should bring because he's still looking after his sister as well, by the way.
Yes, he's still caring for his sister.
His sister was never allowed to get married after that.
She stays in his house.
She's in shame.
She's a desolate woman, it says, which is
there's
tragedy.
there's amazing good things about Absalom.
Yes, that's
we
right.
would identify with.
Once again, moments of flawed character. Now, he's obviously predominantly presented in the flawed light as opposed to the positive light. But once again, what we've been saying in previous chapter, these relationships are complex. We're never 100% good or 100% bad. Human behaviour is much more in-depth and complicated than that.
Yeah. And the more we talk about this, because you do read it straight away and you see the pride, but I think this is so relevant to our culture right now, the way that we see things.
So are you saying, because I think this is where we have to be, I think it's good that we acknowledge victims. I think that's not been done enough.
Yes.
But there is a risk that we acknowledge victims in such a way that we don't do the victim service if we actually allow people to ultimately let that fester and ultimately take vengeance into their own hands, because that will actually cause them to turn into the very people that maybe they were treated by.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, I do mean that, but I also mean that we allow our hurts to become so big that our own judgment is clouded from right and wrong behavior.
Yeah.
So we think the actions that we do out of our hurts are right.
Yeah.
Even though it's actually wrong to go and try to kill your dad.
Yes. So maybe that's where this whole upside down kingdom of Jesus comes into it. Because he's talking about loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you and do good to those who harm you. It's counterintuitive to human behavior. And it's not, I know that that's been weaponized the other way in the past, where we downplay victims, and Jesus speaks up for victims. He stands up for the weak and the vulnerable. That's part of the heart of God. But we run the risk of actually going so far the other way that we're not actually helping the victims either. But if we can find a way to acknowledge the pain, but then teach people the processes and help them through the journey of forgiveness and release and trusting God, like David had to do, like Joseph had to do with his brothers, despite the unfair treatment, we actually then maybe get to a place where that unfair treatment that abuse makes a person stronger, not weaker. Makes them more like Christ. That's a hard process to get through. I'm not saying it's easy. It's complicated, but I wonder if that's what we need to just try to do. I don't think speaking out against people claiming to be victims is the right way to do it. I think we're so far from that, but I think we acknowledge victimhood, we acknowledge abuse and poor treatment, and then help people on the journey of forgiveness.
Yes. Yep.
Maybe Absalom could have been helpful in that journey.
Yeah, he could have. If David had been a better father, a more loving father, he could have stopped all of this.
Yep.
He could have sat Absalom down and talked about it. He could have, first of all, done the right thing. Maybe not
whether
put
he
his son to death,
put him to death or disciplined him or did something. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you put in that context, but there was no hint of any kind of consequence for Amnon's behaviour, and maybe that's what started this festering process in Absalom. So it says Absalom never said a word to Amnon after that, not a word. So he just let that bitterness take root in his soul. That was justified because it was unjust.
Oh, yeah. That's a vicious thing that happened. Yeah, and David should have stepped up. He should have been a good dad, but he was not. In many ways, he was an absent father.
Yes, he was.
He just let them do whatever they wanted to do.
Yep.
Yeah, and you need to come back and look at all this from his fathering, I think, from the perspective of his lack of fathering
Yeah, this
skills.
is a massive psychological story, sociological lesson about fathering in David, definitely.
Yeah.
And Saul, for that matter, too, the way he's fathered Jonathan as well. It's there. Yeah.
And so you can read these chapters and come at them, from a lot of angles.
Yep.
You could come at it from that, from identifying with Absalom. You could come at the pride angle. You could come from wanting to see David be the king that God wants him to be. And you could read that David is right in all of this if you wanted to.
Yep. And you'll find
a lot of ambiguity.
Validity in all of those. Ambiguity is the word. Because we humans are ambiguous creatures. There's only one who isn't ambiguous, and that's Jesus, because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. The rest of us, we are totally ambiguous.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think if we looked at it this way, Absalom thinks he's doing the right thing.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. And David is off humbled.
Mm-hmm.
But Absalom as well, Hushai here, it's obvious that he appeals to his pride.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it.
There's no way you would take on this stupid advice.
No.
Because Ahithophel has very good, solid, sound advice. And Hushai's just sounds like madness.
Except it's appealing to his sense of grandiose, whatever the word is.
Yes.
Grandiosity?
Yeah,
is that a word?
I'll take it. So he goes, so Absalom agrees. He's like, yes, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go take out my army and do it. But in the meantime, the difference between the two was Ahithophel's, geez Louise, can I say it? That that wouldn't have allowed David time to muster his troops and get fed and be prepared for a battle.
Yes.
But this one is going to give him some time.
This is going to give him time to be prepared for a battle.
Because he's calling the whole country from Dan to Beersheba.
It's a
He's
long
got
way.
to get them all down.
That's a couple of weeks at least.
Mobilising 12,000 men at least.
Well, no,
it's 12,000,
Ahithophel's
isn't it?
advice was 12,000 men.
Oh, okay. David's is more than that. There's way more than that.
Hushai's would have been 100,000 men.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
So he's mobilising that, which means they've got to get all the food and everything ready. So
it's a
David's
massive
allowed
job.
a lot of time to get ready.
Yep.
So Absalom and all the company agreed that Hushai's advice was better than Ahithophel. And there's a funny line here. God had determined to discredit the counsel of Ahithophel so as to bring ruin on Absalom. Who threw that line in?
That's being probably written by the Second Temple writers who are just
Many
commenting
years
on it
later.
many years later, just little
Yeah.
brackets. By the way, just this is what's going on in the story.
Yeah.
That's my best guess.
Yeah, because
And
it
that
is
might
in
be
brackets.
confronting to some people, but that's the way the Bible was written. It was written and then commentated on and recommentated on. So that would have been the way that was written.
So it's not necessarily saying that God had determined. They are concluding that
They're
God
concluding.
had determined.
Yeah. The evidence of the story indicates this now that we have the benefit of hindsight. We can see what actually took place. Yep.
They're things you really need to notice when you read
Yeah,
through, because
definitely.
otherwise you think, oh, God's determining this. Okay. Hushai tells the priests Zadok and Abiathar. Now, they were the priests that were the priests at the time of David, but
Correct.
David had told them to stay behind
With the ark.
with the ark.
Yep.
So they were willing to go with
And take the ark.
David, take the ark, yes, but they've stayed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Absalom must think that they have betrayed David.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. And their 2 sons play a role in this story. Right. Okay. So Ahithophel, basically Hushai recounts the story, but he says to Zadok and Abiathar here, go and tell David, send this message as quickly as possible to David. So this was pre-organized. David had people in the town that were going to sell out Absalom.
Yep. This is ancient spy. What's the word? Spycraft. This is what this is. Ancient spycraft.
Okay.
Before the days of being able to hack into signals and things, this is what they did.
All right. So this was set up. There were going to be the 2 sons of the priest were going to be waiting for a message.
Yep.
And the message is, don't spend the night on this side of the river. Cross immediately, or the king and everyone with him will be swallowed up alive. And Jonathan and Ahimaaz were the sons. They were waiting at En Rogel, a place. And a servant girl would come and give them the messages, and they would go and tell the king David, for it wasn't safe to be seen coming into the city. A servant girl, a maid, has all this responsibility.
Yeah, because she can slip under the radar.
She slips under the radar. Look at that. Even the most unassuming, smallest maidservant girl
can be used by the Lord.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Plays a mighty role in the kingdom of God.
And a role that probably no other soldier would have been able to play. Ahimahaz and Jonathan get seen shortly, leaving, and that creates enough of an unsettledness, but the servant girl just able to slip through.
Yeah, so does she take the message? She takes it because it's not clear whether she is meant to or they're seen. But either way, she's ready to.
I have to reread that. I always thought she got the message to them and then they were seen after they got the message.
Oh, see, because it says a servant girl would come, but a soldier spotted them and told Absalom.
Yeah,
so the 2 of them got out of their fast and
went
went
to... Well, they must have known, though. They must have got the message. Maybe a soldier saw the girl talking to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had the message to pass on.
Yeah. So they then go to this man's house, and he has a well in his yard, and they climb into it. And the wife takes a rug and covers the well and spreads grain onto it so no one would notice anything out of the ordinary. There you go. Another woman, female playing a big role, and she saves them.
Yep.
Because the Absalom servants come along and the woman says to them when asked, have you seen them? She says they were headed toward the river. And they looked for them and they couldn't find them. You know what's funny here? I read in this one commentary that this is technically not a lie because they're in a well and they're actually standing on top of water. Because other ways of saying it is like they've crossed the water or something.
That sounds like a fundamentalist commentary that wants to say there's really funny. You can't lie in the Bible and all that sort of stuff. But they twist things to say when David says things to that's probably just going too far. Yeah,
you can imagine this scene and you're seeing this in a movie, how much fear she would have had. Yeah. But she was very brave. And it's not the man who does it. It's the woman who does it.
It's her. She's the one who puts her life on the line.
Yeah, because they go to the man's house, but she does the dirty business.
Yep, that's right. Totally.
She protects them and then lies.
And then lies to protect them. Yeah. Yep. Which leads to that whole ethical conversation around, which is outside of the scope of today's podcast, but around, is a lie ever acceptable under certain circumstances, all that kind of stuff. It's an ethical conversation. Before you just say no, all I'd say is do some Christian ethics and then you might rethink that.
Okay, so they make it back to David and they tell David to get up and cross the river quickly because Ahithophel has given counsel against you. David and his whole army were soon up and moving and they crossed the Jordan. As the morning broke, not a single person didn't cross. So they'd all
gone across the Jordan River.
So this is thousands of people.
I'm going to say hundreds because most of Jerusalem stayed behind.
Oh, but the army is hundreds and thousands later on.
Oh, you're talking about this is David's contingent of the army crossing the river. Yeah, so that's a smaller contingent. This is probably his guard. This would be. Oh,
no, it does say David stands at the gate and they pass out in front of him in hundreds and thousands.
Oh, it says hundreds and thousands.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't say 100,000. It says in hundreds and thousands.
Okay. I've never pictured David as taking that many with him. Okay.
Maybe he doesn't. Maybe they gather from the other side.
Maybe. Yeah.
Who knows?
Okay. I've always thought he had several hundred men with him, but most of the army is sticking with Absalom. Okay,
so Ahithophel, he realizes his counsel was not followed and he saddles his donkey and he rides home, and then
does a
he
Judas.
Yeah, he does a Judas. Yes, that
Takes his own
interesting.
life.
You say that because Jesus, Judas, David, Ahithophel, but he hangs himself.
Yes. Well, so does one of the accounts of Judas say something very similar. I think you have to see a link between Ahithophel and Judas.
Yes, you should.
Yep.
Because he knew that he was good as dead.
Yep.
Because I think he knows that Absalom is going to lose.
Yes, I think that's exactly right.
Definitely
He
knows.
knows his advice is right. It's gone awry. He might as well kill himself now because when David comes back, it's judgment time for him because he had every chance, and he knows David's going to clean shop when he gets back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how he goes home though. Maybe he said goodbye to people.
Yeah, he did. I think
know.
it says he puts his affairs in order.
All right.
So
I
this
don't
is-
have that here.
Yeah, something like that. It says it. So this is calculated in that sense, which is, I don't know enough about suicide and mental illness to totally understand it, but I can understand what he's doing here. Is he's trying to protect himself and probably potentially protect his family, because I wonder if the risk was if he comes back and
That's true.
David might have taken his whole family out, but if he's dead, he's protected his family from potential further bloodshed and vengeance. It's once again complicated. How many times have I said that in this episode? this
Yeah,
week?
it's complicated and it's sad as well because he underestimates David's ability
David's
to forgive.
forgiveness.
Because he does later on forgive
And
a
he
bunch of people.
he forgives a whole bunch of them. He forgives Shimei for throwing rocks at him.
Yeah.
He that's right. It's totally there all the way through. David forgives. Yep.
And about that time, David arrives at this place called Mahanaim.
Mahanaim.
You say that so well. But Absalom is crossing and the whole army of Israel is with him. They're crossing the river, chasing him down. Absalom had made Amasa head of the army, replacing Joab. Who's Amasa? Here it says he's the son of a man named Ithra, an Ishmaelite who had married Abigail's daughter. But what is he? Hang on.
He's not a Jew. He's not an Israelite. He's an Ishmaelite. But he married into the family. He married Abigail's daughter, didn't he?
Yeah, he's a cousin of Joab.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's a second cousin to Absalom.
He's married Abigail's daughter.
Married?
No, he's also a cousin. He's cousin to all of them. So Amasa is also Absalom's cousin. Because it said he's a daughter. Doesn't it say he's a daughter of...
Who had married Abigail, daughter of Nahash and sister of Zariah.
And Abigail was the lady we were trying to think about before, I think. That was the lady's name.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Abigail. So Abigail is one of Absalom's aunties.
Right.
So this makes Amasa another cousin.
Another cousin. Oh, the family plot thickens. Wow. Okay. So David arrives at this place and he mentions a bunch of people. There's an Ammonite there. There's somebody from Lo-Debar.
Lo-Debar.
Yeah. We talked about that before. Do you remember what it was?
We talked about it again just recently in the last couple of episodes with Phil or Jimmy too, I think. I can't remember.
Neither can I.
Yeah. It's in the back of my mind somewhere.
God, at that point, Lo-Debar, God does something to prove himself at Lo-Debar.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yep. It's something about, I can't remember. It escapes my mind.
And there's this guy, Barzillai, as well. He comes and he brings a feast.
Yeah, this guy's a good dude.
Yeah, beds and blankets, bowls with wheat, barley, flour, grain, lentils, honey, curds, everything.
Yep.
And then even cheese.
Yep.
And they presented all this to David and his army to eat because they said the army must be starved and exhausted and thirsty out in this wilderness. This reminds me of, in the middle of my army, God provides a feast.
Psalm 23.
Yes.
Very nice. I wonder if this was part of when David's writing this. I don't know when he wrote Psalm 23. Interesting. Prepares a table for me in the presence of my enemies.
Yes, he does. Yeah. And David is again in the wilderness, and God often takes everybody to the wilderness, or their stories end up in the wilderness. Yep. God didn't take him to the wilderness this time. He chose to go. He
chose to go there.
Yeah.
But that's our story. We will go through times of wilderness, but we have a choice as to whether we allow the wilderness to prune us or the wilderness to take us out.
Yeah, and I wonder if at this point, when all these people come to bless David, was David aware of Psalm 23? Was he aware that God does provide in these moments?
Yes, I don't know. I'm interested to see when he wrote Psalm 23. I think some scholars think he may have written it at the time around the time he was running from Saul, in which case that's 20 years before this, or whether, I don't know.
Yeah. So would he have thought, whether he realized God was providing it or not, would he have thought, maybe that God was with him at this time? I asked that in such a backwards way.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Well, is he recognizing this gift of this banquet from Barzillai as being God's hand blessing him? Yeah, I wonder if it might be the case. In the middle of all this, he's still, because he's not totally turned on God, so I think he's still trying to find his way. Yeah, I'll go with that.
All right, let's move on to chapter 18.
All right, chapter 18. Talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bible. Wait, what? Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And you can also find us on all the socials. Just search The Bible. Wait, what? And to find out more about our church, just search C3 Camden, C3 Picton, or C3 Thirroul on the web or on the socials. Thanks for being with us today, and we look forward to talking to you on the next episode of The Bible. Wait, what?